Texas obviously took a lot of people by a surprise on New Year's night with the demolition of Georgia, although it was by one touchdown on the board. If you watch the game, it was domination for much of the game in New Orleans as Texas finished in the top 10 in the country after a runner-up showing in the Big 12. We talk Texas football on a regular basis with Steve Helwick. You can join him at the Daily Texan. Also covers the MAC for SB Nation's Hustle Belt, and also does work there at the University of Texas campus station. Steve, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty well. Excited to talk football again. It's not the most football time of year, but there's always content.
Yeah, there is always content. There's plenty to talk about. I actually have more than enough to talk about. I have all sorts of top 10 lists coming out with coaches' rankings and conference rankings that we just concluded, schedule rankings, player rankings. So you can always dig up something. And now, just here in the next few days, we're going to have just about every major school across the country playing college football and at least knocking pads against one another. So for Texas, suddenly, because of the way this season ended in 2018, the expectations have just risen to massive proportions, Steve.
Texas hasn't entered a season with this high of expectations in a while. Maybe from fans because there's always a lot of internal expectations, but now there are external expectations, just nationwide. People might have Texas in their playoff. It's a common Big 12 winner projection. With Kyler Murray being gone and some uncertainty at Oklahoma, I know they got Jalen Hurts, but Hurts doesn't seem exactly like the Lincoln Riley type throwing quarterback that he's had throughout the past few years. So there's a little uncertainty at Oklahoma if they can keep up their dominance. And meanwhile, Texas has arguably the best quarterback in the conference in Sam Ehlinger, someone who just threw 25 touchdowns and 5 interceptions a year ago. Excellent runner. He's been Texas's goal line offense lately. And now you get him in his junior season. He still has some good weapons around him, such as wide receiver Colin Johnson. And then Texas just stole a 5-star recruit from USC and wide receiver Brew McCoy. So they get about as good as a wide receiver recruit as you can get to pair alongside Colin Johnson. And that should really boost Texas's offense next year. Now, I know recruiting rankings don't always translate to on-field success, as there's lots of teams such as San Diego State that consistently field good programs but don't recruit as well. Wisconsin's another one. But just getting a 5-star prospect to put alongside Colin Johnson should really help this offense, and Brew McCoy could take a lot of those receptions from what Lil Jordan Humphrey had last year as Humphrey declared for the NFL draft. Defensively, Texas is looking a little shakier just because graduations and players declaring for the draft. I mean, at the Combine this weekend, we saw linebacker Gary Johnson participate, cornerback Chris Boyd, defensive end Charles Omenihu, and those were their three best defensive players, and now they're all gone. So this offseason will be about getting new guys, getting reps in those starting roles, and just working on defense. Because to have success in the Big 12, you don't have to have an elite defense like Oklahoma does. But Texas's defense really helped them win games last year because they were a solid unit. They weren't too great, they weren't too terrible, but they were a solid unit. And then at the very end of the year, they absolutely stifled the Georgia running game and won the Sugar Bowl. And that's where we are today with those expectations with the program.
This is probably the most intriguing story from a standpoint of looking at wins and losses and whether the expectations are going to be filled here in 2019, because it's a program that has been down since stepping off the Rose Bowl turf against Alabama in 2009 after coming fairly close to winning a national championship in Mack Brown's second attempt to do so. They're down for 10 years. They had a couple decent years as Mack Brown finished, but they weren't contending for national championships. Then, of course, losing seasons despite recruiting in the top 15 in the nation. Then, bam, Tom Herman takes over. The defense plays lights out 2 years ago. They get very close to beating a lot of teams such as Oklahoma and Oklahoma State in overtime. Then the offense takes off behind Sam Ehlinger. He turns into a different player, really shows his development. And with the Georgia win and the close showing against Oklahoma after beating the Sooners, as we mentioned off the top, the expectations are huge. I got to think they're even a bit where you can feel where you are. We just know what we see on Twitter, on social media, and the talk around college football, but you can it's palpable for you. You're on campus there. You can feel the excitement.
I mean, a lot of people see Texas going to the playoff, and that's just because the Pac-12's been down a lot lately, and the Pac-12, there's so many teams in the Pac-12 that just beat each other up, and their champion will finish with 3 losses, such as they did this year in Washington, and then the year before USC finished with 4 losses. So that means that there's 4 power conferences left for 4 playoff spots. And if something like that, unless Alabama and Georgia both make it like they did 2 years ago, it seems like the Big 12 champions destined to spot. Oklahoma has made it in 2015, they made it in 2017, and they made it in 2018. 3 out of 5 success rate for the Big 12 champ going to the college football playoff. So if Texas can establish precedence over Oklahoma, beat them in the regular season again this year, and probably have to beat them in the Big 12 championship game. If they can beat Oklahoma and get that Big 12 championship, that's a playoff spot. Now, that's a lot easier said than done, just saying that they're a playoff contender in March, but they're definitely a dark horse in there. The Big 12 champion does have a good shot just because no Pac-12 team seems to be as dominant right now as they were back in the Oregon Stanford days of the early 2010s. So unless the SEC or the Big Ten can get 2 teams in, it seems like the Big 12 winner is in good shape, and Texas has a good shot at winning the Big 12 this year.
Steve Helwick joins us on a regular basis to talk Longhorns. You can join him at the University of Texas campus TV station, the Daily Texan as well, and also SB Nation's Hustle Belt. Steve, once we get some news out of Texas camp, hopefully we can have you back to talk up with more analysis on the Longhorns.